All right, let's kick off. Welcome, everyone. Here we go. Let me tell a little story. Once upon a time, Drupal 7 time that is, there was a module called WYSIWYG. Still is, still exists. How many people are using WYSIWYG module? Yeah, 2, 3. Come on, don't be shy, it's all right. And at the peak of its time, it supported, what do you think, how many WYSIWYG plugins? Just scream the random number. 10, 15? Well, you're about right. Like, it had a lot of support for WYSIWYG. And just so if you haven't heard WYSIWYG before, it stands for what you see is what you get, and it's a word like editor. It resembles the old look and feel of the word editor, has some toolbar on top, and we can do different things inside its body, placing tables, putting other HTML elements. So obviously the time of the WYSIWYG module seems like on a decline, although it still has more than 130,000 installations officially. However, if you read the documentation as of May of 2024, they only support, how many do you think, WYSIWYG modules? Just a random number. There we go. That's the correct answer. Only 2 editors are supported as of last year. So, and those 2 editors are TinyMCE and CKEditor. So we heard a lot about JavaScript being very, very popular. We have lots of developers there, so I was just wondering, where are they? Apart from that, let's talk about those 2 editors quickly. So first one is TinyMCE. TinyMCE has been built in Australia. It is open source, at least the core part of it. It's a WordPress visual editor, and they make money based on a subscription model. They sell you extra services and loads based on of your usage of the editor. Now, it integrates with the WordPress. As I said, it's a default visual editor, as they call it, and there is a Drupal module support. It can be integrated according to the documentations with all the popular JavaScript frameworks. WordPress is quite happy to have them on board as a visual editor in official documentation. They have a repo on a GitLab, so you can go and actually help them build it. And it's relatively regular release pattern. You can see it on your right-hand side. So there is a module. It doesn't have yet Drupal 10 support, but you can install in Drupal 9 and see. I installed it, it works. Just use a CDN to load it. Unfortunately, or luckily for Tiny, they were acquired by a portfolio company. Still seems like didn't affect for the last 6 months the release cycle and everything. But again, the company was acquired, so I'm not sure what's the future of the CKEditor is. Oh, sorry, TinyMCE. But considering it's their major business, they probably interesting comparing to the competition, which we're going to talk about today, which is CKEditor. CKEditor built in Poland by a company called CKSource. It has about 80 employees, so a lot of people pushing out the code and trying to sell it. So it's quite mature as well. Version 6 of Tiny versus version 5 are the latest version for CK. CKEditor is available Drupal core. It's official WYSIWYG editor of Drupal. And they're also trying to make money selling you premium features. Their plugins are also available on GitHub. It's a monorepo, very similar to Tiny, that contains most of the official plugins. And there are other repositories like for React Angular, Vue, and other popular integrations. The documentation is also there. You can go and check it out. And as I said, they try to use premium features, which we're going to touch base very soon. But probably the most popular and what a lot of people are asking, it's a real-time collaboration. So CKEditor, apart from Drupal core, it's also used heavily in Typo 3. There are a number of integrations. And it's also used as a decoupled editor in Zendesk. So CKEditor is actually decoupled. The engine is decoupled, and you can write your own front end. And that's the end of my presentation, because there's no more. Thank you. So guten Tag, Wien. My name is Vladimir, and I really enjoyed my time in Austria, in Vienna, for the first time. There are no kangaroos in Austria, but where I come from, there are. There's only one country that has kangaroos. And we're also part of Eurovision. I am part-time teacher. This dog is not a contributor yet, but we're getting there. And I also maintain a number of modules and themes. And on a trade to Vienna, I have a good news that Bootstrap 5, that I'm co-maintainer of, just hit 10,000 official installations. So about today's presentation, the goal of today's presentation is actually to answer the question, what do content editors want? And the agenda for today, we're going to talk about the future first, then going to talk about CKEditor 5, what we actually have at the moment, and we're going to talk about the past a bit, and how we can contribute, so we're actually going to get to the future. Okay, I did a version of this talk at New Zealand conference a couple of months ago. I recommend you to go and watch it. It's a bit different and concentrates more on the modules, but there are some similarities as well. And also, I would like to extend the invitation. We have a Drupal South conference in Australia and New Zealand every year. So the next one would be in Sydney in March. So if you're traveling around somewhere, I don't know, feel free to come and say hi. So back to the question, what do content editors want? If you watch latest Dries Node, he wants ChatGPT. He just clicked on this OpenAI button and said, write me about Drupal, 250 words. So I thought, let's do it. I want a ChatGPT as well in my CKEditor. So I installed the module, which brought a lot of modules in. I got this button, put it in my toolbar. I went and configured the CKEditor, and I asked, hey, ChatGPT, write me a joke about Drupal. That's the answer I got. That's funny that I actually went today to ChatGPT and asked to write a joke about Drupal. It was terrible. So no more ChatGPT. So what do content editors really want? And this is a code sprint that we have after the conference in New Zealand. That's not a New Zealand conference room. That was the office one of the companies. That's why everyone looks so nice and close to each other. I had an interesting talk to a guy named Kirill, who is looking after CKEditor special characters module. As we'll see, the CKEditor special characters are available in Drupal core and the CKEditor core. However, he said, in New Zealand, we have a government requirement to have custom special characters. He built this module for CKEditor 4, and he said, I don't have enough time, and it's very hard to wrap my head around the CKEditor 5. There's too much things to go, so maybe we can do something about it. So if you haven't seen special characters, it's just a drop-down which has some categories, and in CKEditor 5, they're completely different to how they implemented in CKEditor 4. So that was an interesting thing. So I actually decided to organize a BOF today. After this talk, I will be in a BOF room, which is on level 2, near the HS13. And if you have a story about CKEditor 5, if you have a module you want to port, or if you just want to talk about CKEditor, feel free to jump in there. We'll be there from 5:10. Now let's talk about what do content editors have. If you watched any of the Dries notes or keynotes, every time the new release comes out, the CKEditor is actually always listed there, one way or another. So what do we have at the moment? At the moment, we have Drupal core 10.1. And the version of CKEditor 5 there is 38.1. So it has its own versioning. They switch in CKEditor 5 to semantic versioning. And we are, as a Drupal community, very, very close to the edge of where CKEditor actually is. So what are the improvements? It was written from scratch. The project started in 2015. It took 2 years to integrate. And as I mentioned before, it has headless mode. Something they were thinking about separating the engine from the view interface. Has modern architecture, own data model. They try and get to accessibility to the front line, although there is no official accessibility documentation for CKEditor 5 yet, but it is more accessible. One of the things being moving it out of iframe and actually using just the tags. There's massive table improvements, which are also part of the accessibility thing, which we're gonna cover. And there are also security. As of version 37, they switched to a TypeScript. That was a massive job done. And now they have about 20,000 tests, and they said, like, actually switching to the TypeScript helped them a lot with testing and with a lot of stuff. And they are looking into certifications like ISO 27001 and SOC 2. If you don't know about it, yeah, just Google it. It's just the security certification saying this product is secure. So what do we have? How does it work altogether? The diagram looks like this. But let's start very simple, from scratch. So yellow would be Drupal modules, green would be CK plugins, which are written in JavaScript. So we have CKEditor 5 core. It has a bunch of plugins, for example, table plugin or auto formatting, font plugin, header plugin, and all these plugins, they all tucked in the core. Remember this monorepo I pointed you, called CKEditor 5? So they all sit in there. And you can go, check them out, use them, extend them. So also, on top of the official plugins that are shipped with the CKEditor 5 core, there are other plugins. You can actually go and create your own plugin, put it on GitHub. I found very quickly this one, which is a build on CKEditor 5 Classic, and adds support for inserting image by URL, uploading image, or adding image from Unsplashed. So some extra image support, someone just put it there. It's CKEditor 5 compatible. You can put it together in your JavaScript application and use it if you want to, or you can write a Drupal module to support it. Anyway, let's move to Drupal. So, okay, we have the CKEditor 5 core, which now been placed into a Drupal. The whole process took about 2 years of work. It was experimental module in Drupal 9 and became stable as of very, very recently, which is 6-7 months ago, which last December when 9.5 and Drupal 10 became available. So on the top, you can see there is a CKEditor 4 toolbar. Next to it is CKEditor 5 toolbar. So you can see the buttons became a bit bigger, the text a bit larger. So they're obviously aiming for the devices as well as not just desktops. So you can see there are some differences, visual differences we can see. But what's actually in there? So if you start digging into the guts of Drupal, there is a CKEditor 5 module. And if you open it up, it just has a module structure according to the documentation, which brings all this functionality to Drupal. If you go to the assets folder, CKEditor 5, you can see all the plugins that are available at the moment in core, right? So just keep that in mind that plugins of CKEditor 5 core that are available in Drupal are not all the plugins, official core plugins that are available from CKEditor 5. So what do we have in core? What are the list of those products? So essential plugin, basically an engine. We have HTML support, stuff that you can actually switch between HTML and the visual representation of it. You have basic styles, bold, italic, strike through, underscore. You have alignment, left, right, centered, justified. We have a block quote. So again, the things that wraps around block quote. We have a code block. So if you are using your website in Drupal 10 to talk about the code, you don't need to install something like Code Mirror. There is already code support, and you can go and say, okay, this is code written in C++. Here's an example. And do it straight away in Drupal. I have a header, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, simple stuff. Horizontal line, again, another separate plugin. Image. Image support, so we can actually see the images and do different stuff with the images. We have indentation, so we can actually move pieces of content left and right. We have language. Again, I have a few questions about language support when I presented last time. Yeah, that doesn't really translate or do anything. You can just mark the particular piece of code as a particular piece of text as written in a specific language. So more for semantic purposes. We have a link, again, simple thing. You select the text, you provide the HTML link, you are done. We have a list. We have a paste from the office. So here's a document written in Google Docs. And here's the same document pasted into CKEditor 5. This is, a separate plugin is responsible for that. We have removed format, so if you copy it from some very, very badly formatted text with a lot of color, you can quickly remove it. We have source editing. Source editing is nice. You can actually click source, HTML. If you're HTML savvy or if your client HTML savvy, they can go and do nasty things. But be aware if your HTML gets long, that's how it looks. So I think there were issues happening at the moment where they were trying to make it small and they couldn't scroll it. So there are a few issues to iron out in the source editing, but yeah, if you have a very, very long content, be aware of that. Special characters, I already mentioned that. Special characters are not customizable. Style. Style is an interesting one. I think it's the biggest seller at the moment in terms of what you can do. So apart from this drop-down that you have like header 1, header 2, whatever you want, you can actually go and do different styles. This is an official demo of what you can do with styles, right? So, but you can define your own styles. Styles are very simple. You cannot define a very complex divs with 2 classes, but you can put div.class, p.class, span.class. And we implemented it quite nice. And then you have this drop-down. Again, there are a few issues, but like with anything, you know, it's a living, breathing product. One of the issues, the styles are actually disabled if you don't have access to some of the tags. But again, still very, very nice visual tool. As I mentioned, there are a number of issues. We implemented a very nice buttons for the clients. So all you need to do is basically a text wrap around the button so they can go and select 4 different types of banners. You can see here, there's a link button, there is a banner, the face box, and yeah. And because they're responsible and working with Bootstrap on the back, client is pretty happy. Table. Probably the most complex plugin judging by how creators talking about it and how much they're talking about it. Massive improvements, including accessibility. And one of the things they really wanted to get rid of is no modals. They said, like, modals are very bad for accessibility in general. Like you have to do a lot of work for a model thing that jumps in your face to do it. And that's how table creation looked in CKEditor 4, right? You have a model, you populate numbers, scroll through the form, click OK, you got a table. This is how table looks in CKEditor 5. Nice and simple. Resembles quite a few Office solutions as well. But also the new document model brought things like row and column selection, related color features. If you go through the release notes, you'll see that the color picker is now reacts to the table in version 38 of CKEditor as well. So a lot of work where you can actually go now select columns, select rows, and yeah, definitely do way more that you used to be able to do in CKEditor 4. So this is our plugins as of version 10.0, which is last December. So what happened in 10.1? Did we have any improvements? Did we have any new plugins? Again, same thing. As you can see, 10 on your left versus 10.1 on your right. There was one plugin added called auto-format. And one of the biggest concerns with the Drupal community was porting it was, is it actually accessible? Can do it? Because a lot of things that can do. Apart from that, version of CKEditor went from version 35 to 38. And they also extended code block, which was already there. We had a look at the code block, but we're just going to have a look what they did to make it work. So auto-format, things like if you type underscore and a word, it will turn into italic. If you type two underscores, it will turn text between two underscores into bold. So now, from version 38, it's actually possible to use CKEditor just by using keyboard. And again, it's a big win for accessibility as well. So that's not now available in Drupal. Code block. So what was the issue with the code block originally? If you remember, I said you cannot edit the languages you support. You had like a list of popular languages, C++, PHP, if it's not that yet, and some other things. But now it's configurable. So there was a change record and an issue related to it. And now you can actually go and add your own things. If you're using Rust and there was no Rust there, you can actually go and add Rust in your code block when you edit in code block. Something else. So again, going back to the same concept that I said before, the things that are available in core of CKEditor 5 not necessarily translate to what we have in Drupal, and we need more support in order to extend it. Okay, so we're almost there. Then extra plugins come in. So again, CKEditor doesn't bring you everything, and we need things like a media support, right? To get actually Drupal media into the Drupal itself. So it's interesting concept, whereas media module itself doesn't contain the media plugin for CKEditor. Media plugin for CKEditor lives in the CKEditor 5 module in the core as well. So you can see on your right, I highlighted two plugins. One is Drupal image, another is Drupal media. If you want to go and dissect it and have a look how the plugins look, so you can do things like allow to embed media. So you have a media button, and it gives you a media library, and you select your media. Say if you want to allow users to override the default view mode of media and embed it. You can even say which view modes you can allow. So this is all done by the plugin that's written in Drupal core. Obviously, some of the features weren't ported There's no time to port everything. But things like, for example, CKEditor font and size module, which you think is kind of basic, but yeah, never make it to the core, or CKEditor find and replace, again, which are the core plugins for CKEditor. They're not core modules for Drupal. You need to go and install them. Luckily, they're already available, so if you go into a font color and add it to the button, add it to your toolbar, there are a couple of buttons. One is a background color, another one is a foreground color. The module is available for you to test. And as I mentioned before in the other presentation from New Zealand, you can check it out. I talk a bit more about those modules. Same goes for find and replace. Here's a find and replace plugin and documentation. So here's a find and replace module. You can go configure it, install it, and test it. So apart from the modules that actually don't bring CKEditor plugins, there are a number of modules that do bring CKEditor plugins. There's an accordion, bootstrap columns, premium features, something that we're going to talk about. So they are all bringing their own plugins, which are green things behind. So CKEditor accordion, again, the module that creates an accordion. You have a button, you drag an accordion there, and then you can see there are a couple of buttons on top of it, so you can insert row, above, below, delete row, have a title, have a content. And that's how it looks out of the box, right? Simple, but yet again, a lot of work to be done so you can actually have an accordion as a part of your content just inside the CKEditor. So you might don't want to configure a paragraph, so don't work with display sheet or something like that. So it's a great alternative. I wouldn't say the best, but it's there for you to use. So CKEditor premium features. So premium features is something that CK Source is trying to make money on, which is not a bad thing because we want them to stay afloat, support CKEditor, and support it. And as I mentioned before, there are a number of premium features, which I'm not going to go list of all of them. You can see them here, but you obviously can go to their website and see it. But I also would recommend you to either install the modules and play with it, see what it actually does, or if you can break it, or if you can help them build it. Or there's a great podcast on Talking Drupal where you can actually hear it from the first hands. I really recommend to listen to this podcast as well. Or go and watch the Prague presentation from last year, which again, also the people, I think they're from CK Source, talking about a lot of premium features as well. But just to highlight a couple, obviously, as I mentioned before, real-time collaboration and mentions, so you can mention different users. They also give you a storage for the images if you want to store your content there. So the list have about a dozen of them, and they keep improving. I think one downside of that is that for CKEditor 5, they actually move spell checker as a premium feature, and it's a third-party integration. I didn't do enough research on it, so I'm just, at the moment, it seems like kind of ground where a lot of people asking for spell checker, and they don't get it. Although, because CKEditor is no longer in your iframe, your browser can highlight a lot of things inside the CKEditor, so something to be aware of. Again, this is a small selection of modules. There's more available, and I recommend you to go and investigate that, especially if you have a job soon to port your module or to port your client's website. Again, this is the whole diagram. I hope you get the idea what you actually get now, because you know knowledge is a power. So you need to know what you have before we'll go and start reinventing the wheel. Now let's talk about the past. And the past is never too good, usually. So we have CKEditor 5 in the core, and we have a CKEditor 4 contrib module. The bad news for all these hundreds of thousands of installation of CKEditor 4 is that CKEditor 4 is no longer supported by the look of it by CK Source, and the support was extended according to this note, by Drupal community until the end of this year. Now, I'm not sure if it's going to translate same as core, because the core has now been extended to 2025, something like that. But yeah, check it out. If you're using CKEditor 4, keep in mind this is a very, very old product, and its end of life is coming very, very soon. So, but again, CKEditor 4 toolbar is still with us. And once you decide to migrate, there are a few tips I want to share. First is do it as soon as possible. Spin dev environment, test environment, local environment, enable CKEditor 5, see what are the issues are. If you have something very, very specific, you'll probably find it earlier. Now, this is difference, which we saw before, between CKEditor 4 and 5. Not all the plugins available for CKEditor 5. So if you're using a lot of custom plugins, special character is a good example. Make sure you jump on those modules and see where they are. Do they need any help? So upgrade path. When you go and create your text format, my only recommendation is don't jump on your existing format and change it to CKEditor 5. It's actually one of the highest issue queue for CKEditor, but we're going to have a look at it a bit later. Create a separate text format, right, called CKEditor 5, and just test it. Switch between your existing one and a new one. Just compare it. I had a lot of issues just going saying, okay, CKEditor, switch to CKEditor 5. Bam, the styles are not populated, you cannot save it. There were a few issues to iron out. Again, they're getting slowly fixed, but that's one of the recommendations. And in some cases, you'll find out that allow tags are hard-coded. Your plugin's actually supposed to allow the text. So for a lot of users who are not admins, you might be struggling to give them some weird tags to use. Again, this is also an issue in progress, but this is something to be aware of. So jump in your text formats and editors, create a new format, basic HTML5 or CKEditor 5, play around with it, switch between them, see if you have any data loss, see if you actually see the same thing. Style bleeding is another thing you might experience. So these days, it's not an iframe, so all the styles from your theme, if you have a lot of custom CSS, they're all gonna end up in CKEditor and might be not a good look first time. You can help, obviously. So you can help by testing. Here is a good example, link it module, very, very popular module. All it does is you can select a piece of text and link it to the existing content in Drupal. From the Ajax box, there was a big issue, and they actually closed it. So there's lots of testing required. So if you used link it before, make sure you can jump in and upgrade to a version, even if it's not a stable one, just to see if it's working. Again, you're going to be well ahead once the time comes actually to upgrade. A lot of modules for CKEditor 5, they actually have a separate branch, which doesn't help us who upgrades the websites, but that's the reality we have to deal with. So test, test, test. Issue queues, as I mentioned before, the top issue queue for the core is provide a good UX to ensure that CKEditor 4 to 5 update is always done before upgrading to Drupal 10, unless the contrib module is installed. And there are tons and tons of issues, so if you feel like you have a spare time, jump on a core issue queue, just read through them. I know it's overwhelming, especially the first time you're dealing with a core, but at least try it, or see maybe you found the issue. Try to search it on Google, on Drupal Q. Or go to the module that you're currently using. Someone came to me with a CKEditor entity link, and I was like, ooh, it looks similar to a couple of other modules. All it does, it links to the content, And you can see there is already an issue open, says on the bottom, says CKEditor 5 support, merge it with link it. That sounds like something sane to do, and maybe provide an upgrade path. Extend core support. So we already talked about the code block, right? So code block in Drupal 10 was just predefined set of languages, which the only way you can actually change was through the API of CKEditor. So you actually need to write a module that has a plugin that plugs into all the CKEditor instances and do some modifications when CKEditor are initiated. In Drupal 10.1, we already have a configuration. Slowly, we're building up. One of the examples I want to show you that there's no support, but CKEditor kind of shows it as a good example of changing the headers. They don't want to do if you don't want to do a drop down through a configuration, you can actually change your headers into separate buttons, right? That's available in CKEditor 5 core, but it's not available in Drupal. So instead of maybe thinking, oh, I'll customly do it for a client, maybe it's a good idea to say, oh, maybe I should create a module, put it there, and eventually it might even end up being in a core. Go through the release notes. So release notes are great. CKEditor release notes shows you what needs to be done. It's interesting because they said actually they added powered by CKEditor logo on CKEditor version 38, and I have CKEditor version 38, and I haven't seen the logo. Maybe I should switch off my ad blocker. But yeah, well, I just thought of it, but I actually couldn't find the logo. And yeah, and that raised a lot of controversy online. Port CKEditor modules. If you have a CKEditor 4 module you're using, port it. Special characters I mentioned before. If you need some custom module at the moment, it's not very easy thing to do. I jumped on it in May, thinking, oh, how hard it can be. And here we are almost in late July. This is an example how to add emojis from the documentation of CKEditor. And it's literally 2 lines of code. But to add these 2 lines of code to Drupal, it's not that easy. I even started the conversation on Drupal Slack, and you can see on the bottom Wim Leers, who is forefront, and I think he's one of the initiative leaders. He said, interesting. Like, even this simple New Zealand case is quite interesting to hear about because you don't hear about how people are using different features. Anchor link, another module that's kind of have been, you can see there is already 82 comments, and it keeps going and going and going, and still needs work. So if you're using anchor link, yeah, seems like something very simple, but there's a lot of discussion happening there. Also, jump on documentation. If you're not a coder, you can jump on documentation. During Drupal 6, Drupal 7 times, we have a lot of these lists. Here's all the CKEditor modules. Here's all these modules. Now these lists are getting a bit outdated. So if you think you can help and review a couple of those modules, or maybe create even a new list for CKEditor 5, yeah, go for it. So again, testing, issue queues, and stand core support, port your CKEditor 4 modules. And if you're looking for help, which we all do, there's a bunch of things there that you can do. Obviously, first of all, a very simple documentation. If you don't like C documentation, no one does, go to social media. Drop is always moving is a great resource. To actually go and see what new things are coming. And they talk about CKEditor quite often. This is how I find out about new features, like a TypeScript integration. I don't go to CKEditor every day and check what the next version brings, but yeah. Tutorial on Drupal.org. Tutorials on CKEditor website. Code sprint, both, so as I said, the BOF would be at 5:10 after this presentation, so feel free to pop in if you have an issue, if you want to share something with your CKEditor experience. 5:10 to 5:40 today. Or maybe you should go to one of the code sprints at the conferences happening, around the world. Tools. CKEditor 5 Dev Tools module, install it. It provides template for your module. It's actually quite nice. I found it very helpful. Simple, and it also contains the CKEditor inspector. You can see this thing on the bottom. Once you enable it, every instance of CKEditor will provide you with model view commands model that you can actually explore and what's happening in CKEditor. This is documentation from CKEditor on that. And if you haven't been to presentation that just happened upstairs by Eric, I recommend you to watch it. He kind of went a bit more into how he debugged the data to build something custom. Slack. As I mentioned before, I started the conversation because I'm not really sure how to approach the special character case, still ongoing. Hopefully it will be resolved soon. The conversation that happened an hour and a half ago, someone actually came in and said, how do you configure font color and font background color in CKEditor 5? And there is already conversation happening where they're saying it actually doesn't work, which wasn't the case for me when I tested it, but it might be something broken. Maybe there is some conflict. So Slack is a great tool to go to. Again, looking for help, documentation, tools, code sprints, Slack community. We're here to help each other because, again, we're all using these tools and we're trying to, build the greatest product we can. So in summary, what's the CKEditor future in Drupal? It's, according to the creators, it's a long-term collaboration. And the Drupal community forces CKEditor, and CKEditor forces Drupal to actually pick up the roadmap. And it is community-driven. CKEditor end of life, as of now, December 2023, inside Drupal. Outside Drupal, it should be about to die. And I would also recommend you to contribute. As far as I go, I keep on porting modules when I have a spare time. I am investigating a lot of accessibility features, and hopefully we'll create a talk on that in some near future. And for the next year, I'm actually planning some sort of a development deep dive into how to create a CKEditor 5 complex plugin, either as a conference talk or maybe a tutorial. So that's all. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being very hospitable, and I really enjoy my time in Vienna. And can I have a round of applause for organizers as well? Do we have any questions? Well, I will be in the BOF otherwise, so come see me there if you want to talk. Yeah, and have a good conference.